Hey there, coffee lovers. Ready to geek out a little about where your coffee actually comes from?
Always up for a coffee deep dive.
Today we're taking a look at this article. Kind of a weird title. Where does Italy grow coffee? From Coffee at Corner.
Yeah.
I mean, Italy, famous for coffee. But do they actually grow it?
Yeah, you always think of like espresso and cappuccinos.
Exactly. So let's find out. What do you think? Does Italy actually grow all the beans for those amazing coffee drinks?
Well, they're masters at roasting and brewing, that's for sure.
Right.
But when it comes to actually growing the beans, not so much.
Uh-huh. So the article title is a bit of a trick.
Kinda, yeah. It's
Yeah.
more about busting that myth. Italy gets its beans from all over the place.
Okay, so no rolling hills of coffee plants in Tuscany then.
More like vineyards.
Ah, right. So where do those beans actually come from?
Well, the article mentions a few key players.
Okay, lay it on me.
First off, you gotta talk about Ethiopia, often called the birthplace of coffee. Some regions have like thousands of coffee plants per hectare.
Wow. Just rows and rows of coffee plants as far as the eye can see.
Not exactly. They're not just growing on flatland. A lot of it's high up in the mountains.
Really? Why is that?
Well, take the Harar region, for example. Known for incredible coffee, but the plants are growing way up high, thousands of feet above sea level.
Huh. So coffee likes the high life.
It seems so.
Why though?
The cooler temps, thinner air at that altitude, it all makes the beans grow slower.
Makes sense. Slow and steady wins the race, right?
Exactly. More concentrated flavor, kind of like slow cooking. All about the environment, the whole ecosystem.
Fascinating. So it's not just sunshine and heat. It's like this delicate dance of factors that creates the perfect bean. Okay, so Ethiopia, high altitude, coffee heaven. What's next?
Well, the article talks about Colombia, big name in coffee, obviously.
For sure.
But here's the thing. It says they mainly grow Robusta beans.
Robusta, not Arabica. I thought Colombian coffee was all about Arabica beans.
Nope. Robusta's the main deal there.
So what's the difference?
Oh, it's a whole different beast. Robusta. Think bold, intense, kind of like a really dark chocolate with a bit of an earthy kick.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, it's often the base for a really strong espresso.
Ah, the kind that wakes you up in a single sip.
Exactly.
I see, I see. Okay, so we've got Ethiopia with its high-altitude Arabica, Colombia rocking the Robusta. What other coffee hotspots are out there?
Well, the article mentions Costa Rica. Actually, it calls it the best coffee producing country.
Best. That's a pretty bold claim.
I know, right?
I mean, can you really say one country is the best? Taste is subjective, probably?
Absolutely.
So what makes Costa Rica stand out?
Well, they're known for super careful farming and processing, really focused on quality and sustainability.
Ah, so maybe best in terms of their approach, like setting a high standard for how coffee should be produced.
Could be. They're definitely raising the bar.
Speaking of doing things differently, the article mentions India as a huge coffee player.
Second only to Brazil in terms of how much coffee they produce.
Wow, really? I
Oh,
didn't know that.
Yeah. Huge. But it's interesting because they have this mix of old school and modern methods.
What do you mean?
Like in some parts of South India, they've been doing organic coffee farming for like centuries, passed down through generations.
Wow, so traditional.
Totally. But then in other areas, they've had to get creative because there's not as much land. So they've adopted more modern, intensive farming techniques to grow more coffee in smaller spaces.
Huh. So a blend of old and new. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah, adapting to the circumstances. And, we were talking about different countries and their coffee. Did you know Thailand actually grows a lot of the world's coffee?
Thailand? Really? I had no idea.
Right. They've got that perfect tropical climate, warm, lots of rain, perfect for those Robusta beans.
So that's why they're a big Robusta producer.
Makes
Makes
sense.
sense.
Totally. Now get this, the article even mentions Japan as a major coffee player.
Wait, Japan? Like the land of tea ceremonies.
I know, right? It's wild.
It doesn't exactly scream coffee plantations to me.
Right. But they're a major producer and they import a ton too. It's like they've cracked some secret code.
So how do they do it?
Uh-uh.
Japan's not exactly known for its tropical weather, is it?
Nope. But they've figured out how to create the perfect growing conditions, even if it's not naturally there. Think greenhouses, climate control, super meticulous care. It's like they're building their own little tropics right there in Japan.
Wow, that's dedication.
Mm.
But how does that affect the coffee itself? I mean, can you really get good coffee from a greenhouse?
Well, they're not just growing any coffee, they're producing high-quality Arabica beans.
Really? So Japanese greenhouse coffee is actually good.
Yeah, it's known for being delicate, kind of floral, with a really clean taste.
Huh. I never would have guessed. Okay, so Japan is like the underdog of the coffee world, defying expectations.
Exactly. It just goes to show you coffee can thrive in the most unexpected places. It's not just about geography, it's about passion and ingenuity. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even gotten into the history of coffee, the roasting and brewing process, the impact of climate change.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
There's a whole universe of coffee knowledge out there.
I'm ready to dive in. Let's keep exploring.
Speaking of a whole universe of coffee knowledge, you mentioned climate change.
Right, yeah.
And, all those perfect growing conditions we talked about, that balance of temperature, the rainfall, even altitude. Climate change is really messing with that.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of scary to think about. I mean, for the coffee farmers especially, right?
For sure, a lot of regions are already being hit hard. Unpredictable weather, hotter temps.
Yeah.
It's making things really tough.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Pests and diseases are becoming more of a problem too.
Mm.
All of that can really affect how much coffee they can grow and, the quality of the beans.
It's a huge issue. So, is there anything that can be done? Or is this just like the end of good coffee as we know it?
No, there's hope. But it takes a lot of work from the farmers, from consumers, from everyone. Sustainable farming is a big part of it.
Okay. What does that look like in the coffee world?
Well, there's shade-grown coffee, for one.
Shade green.
Yeah, basically means the coffee plants are grown under a canopy of trees. Helps to protect them from those extreme temps and stuff.
Oh, that makes sense.
And it's good for biodiversity, too.
So by choosing shade-grown coffee, we're actually helping out.
Exactly. Supporting a more sustainable way of doing things. And then there are things like fair trade certification, making sure farmers are getting paid fairly, working in good conditions.
Right, that's important.
It all adds up to create a more resilient coffee industry, one that can actually adapt to these challenges.
That's really encouraging to hear. So
Yeah.
we can actually make a difference with our coffee choices.
Absolutely. Speaking of choices, the article mentioned those main types of beans, Arabica and Robusta, but I've heard there are other, rarer kinds of coffee beans out there.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, there's Liberica coffee, super rare, mostly grown in Southeast Asia.
Never heard of that one.
It's got this smoky, almost spicy flavor.
Wow, okay.
Some people say it has hints of wood and leather, even.
That's pretty intense. What if I wanted to try something a little gentler?
Well, maybe Excelsa coffee would be more your style. It's got this kind of fruity, tart flavor, bit of a dark roast thing going on.
Ooh, I could see myself liking that.
Yeah, it's often used in blends to give them more complexity, you know?
Right, right.
And that's just the beans. Then you've got all the different ways to brew coffee.
Oh, yeah, for sure. French press, pour over.
Yeah,
Is that what it means?
exactly. And then there's the siphon brewer. That's a whole other level.
I've seen those. They look kind of like science experiments.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
But each method brings out different flavors in the coffee. It's pretty amazing.
So it's not just about the beans themselves, it's how you brew them too.
It's a whole art form.
Yeah.
The water temperature, the grind size, how long you brew it for, it all matters.
Wow, okay. I'm starting to feel like a real coffee newbie here.
Hey, we're all learning. That's the fun part.
Yeah, you're right. I'm definitely feeling inspired to up my coffee game now, try some new brewing methods, maybe hunt down some of those rare beans.
It's the spirit.
You know, we were talking about coffee from different countries earlier. What about that Kopi Luwak coffee? The one that's eaten by a civet cat.
Ah, yes. Kopi Luwak. The coffee that's been, shall we say, processed in a rather unique way.
Yeah, definitely a conversation starter.
Some people are crazy about it. They say it's smooth, complex.
I've heard that.
But others, well, they find the whole idea a bit much, which just goes to show you how different our tastes can be and how culture influences what we think of as a delicacy.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could bring myself to try it.
It's definitely not for everyone.
I think I'll stick to my shade-grown fair trade brew for now. But it is fascinating to think about how coffee can spark all these conversations about ethics, sustainability, even just like what we consider good.
Absolutely. It's more than just a drink. It's a window into all these different...
This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
Me too. We've covered a lot of ground.
From high up in the mountains of Ethiopia to, well, a civet cat's digestive system.
Quite the journey. And we've talked about climate change, sustainable farming, all those amazing different types of coffee beans and brewing methods. It's incredible how much there is to learn about this one little bean.
But what does it all mean for, like, the average coffee drinker? The person who's just trying to enjoy their morning cup? What's the takeaway here?
I think it's about realizing that coffee is more than just a caffeine fix. It's a connection to all these different cultures, climates, communities around the world.
Right.
And when you understand that journey, from the bean to your cup, it just makes you appreciate it on a whole other level.
Yeah, it's about savoring that moment, knowing the stories behind those beans, and how our choices can actually impact the future of coffee.
Exactly. It's about being mindful, being curious, being open to all the amazing possibilities that coffee have to offer.
I love that. Now, before we wrap things up, I have one final question for you. We've talked about the challenges facing coffee, especially with climate change. But what about the future? Is there hope for innovation, for finding new ways to adapt?
That's a question that coffee researchers and farmers are asking themselves every single day. And the good news is there's some really exciting stuff happening.
Oh, like what?
Well, scientists are working on developing new coffee varieties.
New varieties.
Yeah, ones that are more resistant to pests and diseases that can handle those extreme weather changes.
Oh, wow. That would be a game changer.
It would. And they're looking at ways to use water more efficiently on coffee farms to make the whole process more sustainable. It's all about finding solutions.
That's amazing. And what about the brewing side of things? Any cool innovations there?
Definitely. Some companies are making coffee makers that use less energy, create less waste, and there's a lot of experimentation with new brewing techniques trying to get even more flavor out of the beans.
That's so cool.
The coffee world is constantly evolving. It makes me hopeful that we can keep enjoying this amazing drink for a long, long time.
Yeah, it's inspiring.
And we can all be a part of that by supporting sustainable coffee, trying new things, and just being aware of the impact our choices have.
This deep dive has been incredible.
Me too. Learned a lot.
We barely scratched the surface, though, right?
Oh, yeah. There's always more to discover.
Well, before we say goodbye, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. So we've talked about where coffee comes from, how things like climate change are affecting it, and all the cool innovations happening in the coffee world. But here's a thought. What does your ideal coffee future look like?
Oh, that's a good one.
Like if you could wave a magic wand and create the perfect coffee world, what would it be?
That's tough. I mean, obviously, I'd want every cup of coffee to be ethically sourced, grown sustainably, good for the planet, good for the farmers.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'd also want people to keep being curious about coffee, keep discovering those unique flavors, those hidden gems, keep pushing the boundaries.
Right. It's about so much more than just that morning caffeine kick.
Exactly. It's a whole experience, a whole journey. And I think the more we understand about coffee, where it comes from, how it's made, the more we appreciate it.
Totally.
It's like each cup tells a story.
Yeah, and it's up to us to, listen to those stories, make sure they're good ones.
Absolutely. Support the farmers, support sustainable practices, be adventurous, try new things.
Yes. Don't be afraid to explore the world of coffee.
It's a delicious world out there.
That's a great way to put it. Well, on that note, I think we're going to wrap up this deep dive.
Sad to see it end, but it's been a good one.
It really has. Learned a lot.
Me too. And hopefully our listeners did too.
To all you coffee lovers out there, keep exploring, keep brewing, and most importantly, keep savoring every sip.